You're watching VinylicPumaGaming. What's up guys, back with another Fallout 4 video. Today, I wanted to discuss one of the more mysterious companions that you can acquire in this game, and that's going to be Cait. While we certainly get some backstory from her, there is still a lot we don't know. For example, how exactly is she Irish? And if she isn't really Irish, who is she really? With this video, I want to go over Cait's backstory with you, as well as discuss both of these questions more in depth. So I guess without further ado, let's start. As far as we know, Cait is a 26-year-old Irish woman by the time of the events of Fallout 4. She can serve as a companion for the sole survivor, and the player first meets her at the combat zone in downtown Boston, where she acts as a cage fighter. As you travel through the Commonwealth and improve your affinity with her, she reveals some of her backstory to you, and according to Cait, she lived with her abusive parents for the first 18 years of her life, where she was eventually sold into slavery. She spent 5 years with these slavers, where she picked up some skills, particularly when it comes to both pickpocketing and lockpicking. She even remarks that stealing a few caps out of a sleeping man's pocket is a piece of cake, as long as you don't get greedy. Eventually, she was able to save enough money up to buy her own freedom, and instead of returning home to get on good terms with her parents, she returned home enraged and ended up killing her parents for what they had done to her. Based on some of her dialogue, it seems like Cait regretted killing her parents even after what they had done to her, and she says the following when the sole survivor comments on what she did.
Sounds like justice to me.
Was it justice? Or was it murder? When I close me eyes, all I can see is their faces twisted with fear. And then my mind starts wandering and I start judging myself. And it's ripping me the fuck apart. You think I inject myself with all that shite and drink myself drunk because I'm a tough Irish girl? I do it so I can forget and move on with my miserable life. So there you are. The entire flawed package known as Cait, stripped bare for your perusal.
After Cait killed her parents, she eventually ends up at the combat zone, where she worked for 3 years until the sole survivor shows up. She describes the experience as, quote, 3 years of getting beaten to hell by a bunch of losers and lunatics. She also goes on to say that she did it because she was alone and that deep down that she felt like she wanted to die, and maybe one of her opponents would end up killing her in the ring. Upon spending more time with Cait, she eventually comes to trust you more, and she eventually asks for you to help her treat her psycho addiction. This particular quest, Benign Intervention, involves traveling to Vault 95 so that you can treat her condition. After you fought through all of the gunners, you will eventually come upon a room with an extractor chair, which can remove her addiction. You convince her to take the treatment, and afterwards, she's cured. You are then granted the Trigger Rush perk. As you've probably picked up on by this point, Cait is clearly the product of abusive parents. As a result, she is depressed, very distrustful of most people, and until you meet her, she is fighting, drinking, and injecting herself until she dies. At the same time, Cait is also a very peculiar NPC in this game. You would think that someone like Cait would have much more of a northeastern accent, like your typical Boston natives would. Instead, Cait has an Irish accent, which is uncharacteristic for Boston. Now, it is true that Massachusetts actually has many natives that are of Irish descent. In fact, that is why you see a lot of Irish-themed locations in Fallout 4, like the Irish Pride Industry Shipyard or the Four Leaf Fish Packing Plant. There's also the Shamrock Tap House, which is an Irish-themed bar from before the Great War. However, keep in mind that these structures were built by the descendants of Irish immigrants that would have come to the United States in the early 1800s. Over time, these people's children would have gradually lost their original Irish accent and adopted a more modified Boston-style accent that you may hear today. Also, keep in mind that Fallout 4 takes place in the late 2280s, so I highly doubt that anyone would have an Irish accent and be native to Boston. They would have to be from some other part of the world. Cait talks to the player about her parents, how they sold her into slavery, and how she eventually became free and ended up killing her parents. What isn't mentioned is where all of this took place, though. Did it take place in or around the Boston area? Did it take place in another part of North America? Or did Cait actually manage to travel across the Atlantic from Ireland itself? Both Fallout 1 and Fallout 2 have Irish characters. However, Fallout 3 has specific characters that immigrated to the post-war United States from Ireland. Colin Moriarty, the saloon owner in Megaton, immigrated to post-war America with his late father. Colin's father helped establish the city of Megaton. However, when Colin was 14, his father was killed by raiders, and thus he inherited the town, so to speak. While the source for this particular fact doesn't come from in-game and comes from an official guide from Fallout 3, if it's still canon, that basically means that people can immigrate from across the Atlantic to the American wasteland. It would also explain Cait's origins somewhat, as it seems fairly unlikely that Cait would be a native of Boston. There's also a possibility that Cait wanted to get away from Ireland due in large part to a lot of the horrible experiences that she had there as she was growing up. So she immigrated to the United States and ended up in Boston fighting at the combat zone. Aside from Irish characters appearing in Fallout 3, there is also ALLISTAIR Tenpenny, who is presumably from the United Kingdom. And like Colin Moriarty, it appears he was able to immigrate to post-war America as well. Emil Pagliarulo, who was one of the lead designers for Fallout 3 and 4, mentions that ALLISTAIR Tenpenny came to the capital wasteland from Great Britain to seek his fortune. Keep in mind, too, that the Bobrov brothers that run the Dugout Inn in Diamond City don't appear to be native to Boston either, and there is a strong possibility that they may have immigrated to post-war America as well. The possibility of immigrating to post-war America brings up many more questions. If people immigrate to post-war America, where would they enter? Granted, there is no government in post-war America, however, it would make the most sense if immigrants came to the American wasteland through a trade port of some kind. This also makes me wonder about the state of Ireland and Great Britain after the Great War. You would assume that since Ireland is fairly close to London, that perhaps parts of Ireland would get nuked or suffered from some of the fallout that all of the nukes would produce. Why would all of these NPCs come to post-war America? The world has entered a dark age of sorts, and it seems like the grass isn't necessarily greener anywhere. Or maybe like Cait, they're running from something, whether it's mercenaries or simply their past. Based on what we know of Colin Moriarty and ALLISTAIR Tenpenny from Fallout 3, we know that immigration to post-war America is possible, and therefore, it stands to reason that Cait may have actually come from across the Atlantic. What I will admit is interesting, though, is that Cait doesn't explicitly ever mention where she is from, though she does refer to herself as a tough Irish gal once you've reached a certain level of affinity. Therefore, there is a strong possibility that Cait is from post-war Ireland and is actually Irish. As I've mentioned earlier, Cait may have come to post-war America to escape the awful experiences that she had in post-war Ireland. However, something doesn't really add up about all of this, particularly when she mentions when she was sold into slavery. Based on some of Cait's dialogue, she mentions that she was purchased from her parents with bottle caps. Cait also mentions that during her captivity that she would steal caps from a few of the slavers themselves. The thing is, bottle caps are the adopted currency of post-war America, and there is a possibility that post-war Ireland may use something else as their currency. It is true, however, that Nuka-Cola was a popular drink across the world before the Great War broke out, so that means that Nuka-Cola wasn't just sold in pre-war America, but it was also sold in other pre-war countries as well. Even still, I find it unlikely that bottle caps would be the currency literally everywhere. Perhaps I could simply be reading into things too much, but there is an interesting thing that Cait says after you have reached a certain level of affinity. After explaining to the player about how she tried to run away from her parents, she says the following.
My God, I'm so sorry.
Thanks. But there's more to the story. It would be easy to blame me charming personality on me parents, but they didn't make me this way. I did. I was with those slavers for 5 years. Roughest 5 of me goddamn life. The things they made me do. The way they used me for their amusement. It sickens me to me stomach even thinking about it. But I bided me time and learned to use their own methods against them. Stealing a few caps out of a sleeping man's pocket is a piece of cake, as long as you don't get greedy.
What I find interesting here is where she says, "It would be easy to blame me charming personality on me parents, but they didn't make me this way. I did." Now, I do think that Cait is telling the truth when she says that her parents sold her into slavery. However, there's a possibility that Cait may have adopted the personality and characteristics that are typical of Irish people as a sort of a protection mechanism. Common Irish stereotypes are that they have red hair, they like to drink, and they really like to fight. Perhaps Cait adopted the personality of a tough Irish woman to help her get through all of the awful things that she experienced, and instead of actually coming from Ireland, she is actually from post-war America. Cait could have dyed her hair red in Diamond City, or at any barbershop throughout the wasteland. Perhaps she read stories about Irish people and adopted the persona in the belief that it would make her stronger, and then after that, it simply stuck. Based on what we've seen in previous Fallout games and Fallout 4, it isn't uncommon to see Wastelanders adopt a persona. While it's a more extreme example, consider the Mechanist from both Fallout 3 and Fallout 4. Both Scott Walensky and Isabel Cruz donned the Mechanist persona to make themselves feel more powerful and to protect others. As both of these people were, they were weak. However, as the Mechanist, they're strong. And when it comes to Scott Walensky in particular, his parents also sold him to a caravan merchant at 15 years old. And this situation parallels to Cait's to a certain degree. If you think about it, Cait may have been isolated until she reached the age of 18. Then at 18, she is sold into slavery where she is abused to the amusement of her owners. And in a sense, becoming the persona known as Cait may have been what saved her from captivity and was what allowed her to buy her own freedom. At the very least, adopting tougher personality traits by emulating an Irish stereotype may have helped Cait get through some rough times and enkindled her fighting spirit. Again, helping her to buy her own freedom. Think about the concept of the Minutemen. Ultimately, what is essentially a group of soldiers basically want to live up to the ideal that it's the American Minutemen from the Revolutionary War, fighting for freedom at a minute's notice. You've got to admit that it's weird that Preston dresses up like someone would in the Revolutionary War era, especially since things like combat armor and military fatigues exist. Donning the persona of a Minuteman makes the individuals in the organization feel good, and it also reinforces their belief that they are doing the right thing and that they can overcome any obstacle. Either way, I think both possibilities here are pretty interesting. We know that some NPCs within the Fallout universe have come from other parts of the world, and it would be really interesting to know how they specifically got here. It's kind of interesting to think that people in the Capital Wasteland trade with people in post-war Europe, and that people do seem to travel between both places. Perhaps Cait simply bought her way onto a boat and came to post-war America just to get away from it all. Or conversely, things are just really that bad in the wasteland. Cait happened to live with her parents in one of the areas surrounding Boston. Her parents then sell her into slavery where she is abused to amuse her masters, and then over time, she develops a new and tough personality that she uses to get through the day-to-day, only to buy her freedom 5 years later. I guess it could also be as simple as Bethesda wanting to make Cait into an Irish character to differentiate her from the rest of the human companions in Fallout 4. The rest of the human companions sound like locals, and having Cait be Irish does make her much more interesting. If she was just a generic redhead wastelander, she might be less memorable. Alright guys, that's going to wrap up this particular video. If you like this video, please be sure to leave a like and let me know. Do you think that Cait is actually from Ireland, or has she adopted a personality of some type that is basically like an Irish person? Or maybe you think something else. Let me know in the comments. But as always, like this video if you liked it, click the bell to join the notification squad, and as always, take care, and I'll see y'all next time.